Hello and welcome to the show. This is Addis Dialogue from Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation with me, Chowder. Africa's agricultural system is mostly dependent on rain-fed system. This can't ensure Africa's food security. Rather, Africa depends on foreign aid mostly. Despite the fact that Africa is endowed both surface and underground water resources, its irrigation scheme is very minimal as compared to Asia and Latin America. So far, according to International Forum on Policy, according to International Food Policy Research Institute of recent years indicated that Africa's agricultural system based on irrigation not exceeds 13%, as compared to 37% of Europe. Why? Africa's agriculture always depends on rain-fed, which can't ensure Africa's food security. In today's program, we examine the nuances of Africa's agricultural system and its irrigation, despite its water resources, should need new approach. In today's program, we will have a good discussion with a seasoned and a distinguished African's agricultural researcher, Mr. Robert Okello Arunga, who crisscrossed the world from Africa to Latin America and Asia. Robert Okello Arunga, welcome to the show and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start our discussion regarding Africa's agriculture as compared to other Europe and Latin America and also Asian countries where the water resources may or may not exceed Africa's natural resources, especially the hydro aspects in ensuring Africa's food security.
Thank you very much. The position as is now is that Africa agriculture is not meeting the demands for food, especially. Mainly because, as you have said, we depend on rain-fed agriculture and very little irrigation compared to Asian and other countries, especially Latin America and Asian countries. A number of pronouncements by African leaders, starting from the African Union, have indicated that we should improve our state of agriculture through various interventions so that we can feed an increasing population in Africa. As of now, a target was set that by 2025, we should have no hunger and food insecurity in Africa. But we are in 2025, and that goal has not been achieved. Indeed, if anything, the situation is becoming worse because we are depending so much on imports rather than local production. And this is leading to increase in food insecurity and hunger. In fact, the figures as they are now is that while the ratio of people under hunger and food insecurity might be slightly decreasing, but in absolute terms, the number of people who are hungry and who are malnourished is increasing in numbers. In fact, it's now estimated that there are about between 300 and 500 million people who are not properly nourished in Africa. And it is important that researchers, scientists, government authorities should do something about it. There have been suggestions on how to go about it. And maybe we can discuss this as we go on.
Some research also indicate that Africa's agricultural system needs geographical, hydrological, agronomic, and economical factor transformation. What is your take on that? Because you are a distinguished agricultural researcher in Africa who served for more than 35 to 40 years across the continent.
Our experience is that Africa has got a lot of land, acreage, and if properly used, we can feed the whole population and even have enough excess for export. The problem is that we still continue in subsistence agriculture, and we needed to quickly convert to commercial agriculture. This will require a lot of input from the government and also from the private sector, or even from the civil society. Attempts have been made to improve agriculture. You know, Africa consists of small-scale farms, but most of the farms are above 2 acres, I think. In 2 acres, one can produce enough for subsistence and also for commercial purposes. What we need is to ensure that we can have constant supply of water through irrigation, constant supply of the right practices, agronomic practices. The extension services, which were common in Africa, have collapsed, and most of farmers don't know how to go about farming commercially. I believe that most African countries, because of the small farms available, can go back and institute proper extension services, either through digital platforms or by other means, so that every farmer in Africa will have the requisite knowledge to produce enough food for their families and also for getting into the commercial trade channels.
Okay, if it is the case, why Africa can't ensure its food security? Can Africa afford importing food from other parts of the world and depends on foreign aid? Can Africa afford that?
No, Africa cannot afford this because Africa doesn't have the resources or the funds to be able to import or sustainably. In fact, most of African countries are in debt because of increasing imports. We import a lot of manufactured goods. We import a lot of machinery and fuel. And that's why Africa is in a debt trap. If we now get into importing food, it's not sustainable. We cannot afford it. We'll not have the resources. We'll depend on handouts from other producers, and this is also not sustainable. So we have to set mechanisms within African countries at the national level and sub-regional levels, and even at the African Union level, to be able to produce enough food for our people. And I believe it is possible with proper policies and capacity building. We can be able to produce enough food. I know there is the problem of deteriorating soils, but this can be handled by the proper technologies which are now available for reclaiming soils. I believe that if we have enough water through irrigation and also natural rainfall, we can be able to feed the whole of Africa.
the carrying capacity of African land decreases from time to time because of overutilization of our resources and also due to climate change. What policies do you recommend for Africa to overcome such erratic rain-fed agricultural system and also the global warmings where there is no enough rain as well as subsistence modes of agriculture that Africa is well known?
I think most of Africa, especially in the rural areas, land is being subdivided to sons and now even daughters. And the land available for agriculture is getting smaller and smaller. I think we are aware of this, and we need reforms so that our land units don't go lower than there are now. With the current holdings we have, it is possible that through irrigation, we can produce enough food. Climate change is a reality. And where I come from, I'm also a small farmer. I've seen that there's a climate change, but it can be handled depending on what exactly different areas have different problems with regard to climate change. In certain areas, climate is changing positively. That in certain dry areas, you can now find we have crops. And in other areas where we used to have one crop, we now have two crops in a year. So sometimes climate change is positive, sometimes it is negative in terms of increasing drought in certain areas. But the issue of drought can be tackled in Africa because we have enough water resources in our rivers and the lakes to be able to do effective irrigation through the waters which are available and through harvesting of rainwater when it rains. Most of our water which is in Africa runs down into the oceans. I think with proper harvesting of water in Africa, we can be able to tackle this problem. And I believe this is a simple problem if we have proper policies and proper capacity building in terms of imparting knowledge to all our farmers. This should not be a problem for Africa. I think the problem we have for Africa should be on a higher level of transforming the agricultural products to higher value products, which can also be handled within the proper context of the manufacturing industries.
How can Africans transform their agricultural productivity? Because you have raised it again and again.
Before I get into that, there is also the issue of losses, produce losses through proper. We need to have proper storage systems for our produce so that we can get them to locations where they can be transformed. In fact, one of the need for transforming our agricultural produce, say fruits, for example. If you don't have proper storage facilities for fruits and there's a glut, they will go bad. And there's nothing you can do about them. But if you have proper storage system and you have proper transformation industries, say producing juices, which can be stored for a longer time, then you can be able to, have more food available, more products available within the market. I think the whole system of transformation can be justified by the fact that if you don't transform some of these products, then they don't find their way to where they are needed. So we start with the storage, then we start with the transformation to products which can store for a longer time, rather than products which can go bad after a very short time. And also, transformation is necessary if we want transport or export some of our products in a form that they will be available in the markets, in the global markets. And the technology for transformation is available. And we have some which are already on the ground. We can build on those to be able to transform our produce into products which are edible, products which can be stored, products which can be exported in the global markets.
You have crisscrossed Africa and you have rich experience regarding Africa's agricultural system and transformation from Sierra Leone to Sudan, from North Africa to South Africa. You have rich experience and you are a lived testimony for Africa's agricultural transformation. There are some policy initiatives in different parts of African countries regarding the transformative approach of agriculture using irrigation. How do you see Ethiopia's agricultural initiative, especially the wheat initiative that the government has embarked on?
I was in Ethiopia for about 9 years. And I know that Ethiopia has got enough land, enough agricultural land. In fact, Ethiopia is one of these countries with a big expanse of land. And it has also got systems of water. You have dams, the dam which has been constructed, and various rivers. I believe that Ethiopia is one of these African countries which should not be having anger if we had proper policies in place. It is unfortunate that in the past, Ethiopia has had, incidences of serious hunger problems where the international community had to intervene. I believe that with the resources Ethiopia has and with the organization of the Ethiopian people, their capacity to organize their own things internally, and the human resources they have, I can see that that the program which you have just mentioned, if properly implemented, can go a long way in alleviating hunger and malnourishment in Ethiopia.
The wheat initiative that government produces surplus products of wheat and exporting to neighboring countries, including your country, Kenya. How do you see, and what is your take on that, even the recent phenomenon, the last 2-3 years?
Yes, I think this is a very good initiative. You know, in Kenya, most of the world are getting into this bakery products and cereals in general, leave alone wheat, is in high demand in the whole of Africa. And instead, Kenya, for example, we import wheat from Canada, we import wheat from certain European countries for our bakery industries or confectionery industries. Now, if we could import wheat from our neighboring countries, Ethiopia, for our requirement, our need for cereals, it would really go a long way in first of all, promoting intra-African trade rather than trade with other countries. And because trade in Africa is governed by various treaties within the AU, within COMESA, IGAD, and other regional programs. And trade would be much easier with a neighboring country a neighboring African country, and will also promote development in the whole of Africa. So I believe that if it's fully implemented, it can go a long way. But it should also be directed to increasing the production of teff, which is the staple food. I think what we need is to have our priorities right. If we can produce enough teff for the population of Ethiopia, and also have learned to produce wheat, it will be okay. But there should be a trade-off. What do you want first? Do you want the staple food, or these other foods for export? I believe that these things need to be addressed, and first of all, produce for the local requirement, and then if there is excess land and excess production, then you can export it.
What sort of policy recommendation do you suggest for Africans to ensure it is food security as per the African Union Commission's 2025's agenda to ensure food security, and there will not be no hunger at continental level, though we are at the early weeks or early months of 2025?
Well, we cannot attain food security by 2025. It's too late. Mm-hmm. I think we have to put other targets. But in my experience, I've traveled all over Africa, as you said, South, West, North, and Eastern African countries. One of our problems also is our wars. We have to reduce wars in Africa. I mean, Sudan and South Sudan and North Sudan have got serious good land which can be utilized. Wars have been a major problem within Africa. In fact, Sudan can produce enough food even for the whole of Africa. I think the idea of reducing tensions and wars between sections of Africa should be an important consideration. The other consideration is that we are not doing enough research in agriculture. Our agricultural research institutions, in fact, in some African countries, have collapsed because of a number of reasons. Some of it, poor governance and wrong priorities. So, reduction of conflicts, proper research to inform the agricultural sector. In Kenya here, we had the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute, which was doing very well. But lately, I've seen that most of the agricultural institutions in a number of these countries are not doing well as they used to for issues of, governance and policies and also priorities. I believe that we need to strengthen our agricultural research institutions, reduce conflict, increase irrigation, areas under irrigation, which are informed by which are backed by proper research institutions and proper knowledge from our universities, mm-hmm. our training institutions, which should be research centers. With this combination, I believe that we are looking at another 10 years if we have the correct policies on the ground, if we reduce conflicts, and if we get our research institutions to do what they're expected to do in agriculture and also transformation, we should be able to meet the target we have set for ourselves. To reduce hunger to maybe 5% is now standing at maybe 25%. I mean, in Africa generally. But we are looking at a time span of about 10 years if proper policies are put in place and action taken. Implementation. Policies may be there, but implementation also sometimes is not done properly. And this is where research is critical.
Very good, Mr. Roberto Okello Arunga, distinguished Africa's agricultural researcher and the former board member of Kenya's Agricultural Research Institute, KARI, and who have rich experience in exploring Africa's agricultural system. Thank you very much. Thank you once again for your critical analysis and insight, Mr. Roberto Okello Arunga. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Dear viewers and listeners and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, by this we come to the end of our today's program. You can follow on different social media platforms of Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation. Thank you for being with us. Bye for now.